Vitality and youthfulness. There is a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action, and because there is only one of you in all time, this expression is unique. Martha Graham. Many years ago, while flying home from teaching a 2-week seminar in Chicago, it suddenly dawned on me that each time a student or client of mine improved, she or he radiated vitality. Their faces relaxed, their skin color became more vibrant, their eyes brightened. Their voices became more enthusiastic and melodious. They stood taller with greater ease. They eluded a sense of peacefulness and quiet attentiveness. They moved with greater grace, energy, flexibility, and confidence. When I am able to observe them over several hours or days, as it is often a case in my longer seminars, I notice that their thinking becomes clearer and their ability to express themselves sharper. They laugh more and become lighter in spirit. They exhibit radiant beauty that comes from a place deep within them and is reflected in every part of their demeanor. At this time of this realization, I had been working with a great variety of people, men, women from all walks of life, all ages and conditions. I saw people like the 60-year-old executive recovering from a stroke, the 30-year-old mother recovering from a difficult childbirth, the 40-year-old sales representative wanting to improve his golf game. I even worked with students from the university who were in perfect health but searching for ways to improve their academic performance and creative capacities. Many were referred to me by a friend or spouse who had benefited from this work. Their lives had been going fine, but the workshops opened up new possibilities for them. There were also world-class musicians, dancers, and athletes searching for ways to improve their performance. In addition, I had been doing a great deal with infants and children with developmental problems, which had informed me so much about what adults need in order to thrive. Over the years, I had helped thousands of people move beyond their present limitations, whether those limitations were intellectual, emotional, physical, or even a result of genetics. No matter who they were or why they came, all who opened their minds to this work had one thing in common. They radiated vitality. Reclaim your vitality. Whether you have experienced vitality for a brief or extended periods of time, it is not something you easily forget. You might remember falling in love and feeling filled with energy, light on your feet, and hope about the future. Or perhaps you remember getting your dream job and then bursting with creative new ideas. If you play tennis or golf or some other sport, you may have had the experience many times over of exceeding your personal best and feeling flooded with energy, ready to perform at higher and higher levels. You might recall the deep vitality you felt while making love passionately, or the thrill of empowerment you experienced when you found a new way to increase your income or make a career change. Vitality is something we all know regardless of our activities and interests. If nothing else, we all have experienced vitality in our childhoods during a period of our steepest learning curves when our brains were constantly generating new information, forming new patterns, and creating new possibilities in our lives. For a moment, think about your life in the first hours following your birth. Reflect on how much you have grown and evolved to where you are today. To be where you are today. In those early hours in your mother's arms, you responded to touch, sound, light, movement, and the comfort and discomfort of your body. But you had yet to develop anything resembling voluntary action. You could initiate very little except perhaps to follow a movement with your eyes, suckle, or cry. For many months, even years, your growth seemed to take care of itself. While you were dependent on others to provide emotional, physical, and mental support, the curve of your development was extraordinarily steep, like a race up a mountain path. During this time, you were bursting at the seams with energy, curiosity, spontaneous creativity. And with it came the fire of vitality that made so much of your experience exhilarating. The vitality you experienced in those early years was directly connected to the fact that behind the scenes, your brain was growing new connections and patterns at staggering rate of 1.8 million connections per second. Each new set of patterns provided you with new possibilities for movement, feeling, thought, and action. Nearly every day you develop new capacities and discover new things. Life was exhilarating. What happened between then and now to diminish this vitality? Very simply, when we get to a certain level of development, most of us begin to coast. We stop providing our brains with what they need in order to continue to grow and create new possibilities for us. Our brains either slow way down or stop forming new connections altogether. As a result, we begin repeating the same patterns over and over again. Eventually, with no significant change, our lives become habitual, and we begin to deteriorate in the ways that we think, move, and feel. As adults, we find ways of thinking and doing that work for us. Ways that are usually productive, efficient, and practical. Then we repeat those patterns again and again. After all, we can't reinvent the wheel every time we get up in the morning or drive to work or do routine tasks our jobs require. We never get through the day without having efficient routines and habits we can rely on. The downside is that we can become like automations running in the same old circuits day after day. But a part of our true nature is to go beyond persistent habit and routine. Our brains thrive when creating new information, and this is what we require to feel alive and enthusiastic, vitally engaged in our lives. When we don't provide our brains with what they need in order to create and thrive, we begin to feel lethargic and inflexible. We get aches and pains, and we become less and less responsive to people and events around us. The more this occurs, the more new information seems like a distraction or even a threat to us. We become physically and mentally dull, increasingly unreceptive to anything that seems new or different. It is possible to reignite our vitality at will, regardless of your age, physical symptom. Is it possible to reignite your vitality at will, regardless of your age, physical symptoms, or station in life? The answer is yes. You have the high levels of vitality. You can have the high levels of vitality you long for, and you can recreate it throughout your life. Our brains have an innate capacity to keep discovering and inventing new ways of acting and thinking. They are most vibrant and alive when called upon to differentiate, that is, to recognize finer and finer distinctions and make increasingly finer choices to form new patterns and reach higher levels of complexity, skill, comfort, strength, and heightened levels of performance in everything we do. In this book, you'll learn the 9 essentials your brain needs to thrive. You'll have an opportunity to experience simple, subtle body movements and mental exercises that satisfy those needs and thus awaken your vitality. You'll also discover why and how these methods work based on research and my experience over the past 30 years. And you'll find that the practical applications of these methods are so intuitive that you'll find it easy to integrate them into all areas of your everyday life. Over and over again, I see people come to life who have felt dead or torpid, trapped by restricting circumstances. Sometimes, for many years, I have seen people who have suffered the energy blunting experience of chronic pain, experience the disappointment of stunted life based on rigid and limiting beliefs, or deadened by a life of routine, reawaken their brains and regain the vitality that makes life worth living. They often describe their experience with phrases such as, "I feel 20 years younger," or "I feel like a kid again," "I have never felt better in my life," or "I didn't know this was possible," or "Now I know I can follow my dream." They discover their capacity to enjoy greater freedom, flexibility, and strength with enormous bursts of energy and joy. Exercise number 1. Transformation throughout what you don't yet know. So exercise 1 is transformation through what you don't yet know. Most of us have experienced the feeling that I've tried everything and nothing works. This usually comes while struggling with a difficult situation and settling on a belief, at least for the moment, that what you wanted to happen is impossible. What often proves to be true is not that you had really tried everything, but that you had believed in your own limitations. That is, you believed that the limited knowledge you had at the moment. New solutions and new possibilities await us in what we don't know yet, or what hasn't yet evolved. Think of a time when you felt stuck and then, with new knowledge, created a solution that changed everything for the better. This might have been a relationship challenge, a work-related problem, your sexuality, your health, or a recreational activity. Let this be your reminder that it is always something beyond what you presently know. You need not limit yourself to your present knowledge. Dare to believe in what may seem impossible. There's a wonderful exchange between Alice and the White Queen in Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass. When Alice complained that she can't believe impossible things, the Queen replies, I dare say you haven't had much practice. When I was your age, I always did it for half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Exercise 2. Sorry. The transformational power of knowledge. Take a few moments and create a list of at least one time when you were sure something was impossible for you to have or accomplish, and that sorry. And that later on, with new knowledge, became possible. Then continue adding to this list every day. It can be from any aspect of your life: physical, emotional, mental, relationship, faith, work, financial, recreational activity. It can be a recent experience or something you experienced a long time ago. Practice this skill until you become an expert in knowing that with additional knowledge, you can move beyond what you believed to be impossible. Transformation for a better life. Over the years, I have experienced the joy of working with thousands of people: teachers, accountants, homemakers, truck drivers, lawyers, grandmothers, professors, secretaries, and others. Many faces come to mind as examples of the transformational process people experience as they move beyond what they perceived as personal limitations, ultimately achieving capacities that they only dreamed were possible. Mason's story is particularly powerful. On the surface, her situation shows how pain, be it physical or mental, can compromise our lives, make it difficult or impossible to do even that which we love. It was pain that motivated her to seek help, but it doesn't have to be. Madison's story speaks to anyone wanting to enjoy greater vitality and joy. When Madison walked into a crowded room, people sat up and took notice, captivated by her exceptional air of self-confidence and professionalism. At 42, she appeared 10 years younger, slender brunette, 5'9", and smartly dressed. A successful businesswoman, she was the president of her own consulting firm, coaching executives in key organizations. Happily married to a San Francisco attorney, her life seemed ideal. I first met Madison when she enrolled in my workshop at Anat Baniel Methods Center in San Rafael, California. I started out this workshop by having the participants form a large circle, then asking them to introduce themselves and say what they wished to accomplish in the class. The circle that day consisted of several professional people, including a musician from a symphony orchestra, a couple of school teachers, a psychotherapist, and a surgeon. There were housewives, retired men and women, and a college girl who was studying biology. All had their own reasons for coming to the workshop, ranging from the retired doctor recovering from depression to the young father grappling with panic attacks. Madison told us that she was feeling like she was dying by inches, but because she was so good at hiding what was going on with her, few people knew that she was in consistent pain. As she described her experience, I was amazed that she had even showed up for the workshop. The worst thing for her was that the pain she experienced was eating up her energy. This was something that nearly everyone at the workshop could understand, since most people have experienced how pain can sap their energy and compromise their lives. Madison was a person who once had all the energy in the world. She never dreamed in her life that her life would be any different. Over the previous 7 years, she had built a successful consulting business, mostly on her own, but now she had to turn it all over to assistants to run, and she was afraid that things would go downhill without her direction. These necessary changes were breaking her heart, but she had no other options. She turned most of her attention to her recovery, searching for a way to regain energy and well-being as she had always enjoyed in the past. I asked Madison to tell me how this had come about, seeking clues to the link between her physical conditions and the loss of energy and vitality she described. She paused and took a deep breath before going on. 2 years before, while driving home in the fog, a driver in front of her swerved to miss a road hazard and lost control of his car. Madison slammed on her brakes and managed to avoid colliding with the other car, but a split second later, a delivery truck slammed into her car. Though she was badly shaken, she thought she was going to be fine, but the police ordered an ambulance, and she raced to the hospital for observation. The doctor found no broken bones or signs of other injuries, so she was released at the same night and told she would be okay. All she needed was a little bed rest. Okay turned into anything but. She woke up the next morning with excruciating neck and back pain. Further medical examination showed she was suffering from classic whiplash injury, so her doctor sent her to a physical therapist. For a while, she got some relief from the stiffness, but her debilitating pain continued. She dreaded the idea of going back to work. She didn't have the energy for anything. She had to force herself to even get out of bed. When further medical tests proved inconclusive, Madison began looking for other sources of help. She tried yoga, massage, and acupuncture, all of which brought some relief, but always the energy-sapping pain returned. She found a gifted Pilates instructor who was successful in reducing the pain to a greater degree, but Madison continued to feel very constricted in her movements and limited by the pain. She felt old at 42. After a few sessions, her Pilates teacher told her about the work I was doing, and she signed up for the workshop. One of the class participants, the retired doctor in the class, remarked on how he had noticed that while she stood tall and seemed flexible enough, she moved like she was walking on eggshells. I nodded in agreement. This had been my first clue that Madison was in pain, fearful of moving. Meanwhile, her personable ways successfully masked her suffering from most people around her. When I asked how long she had been experiencing this pain and restriction, she looked at me with agonizing expression and answered that it felt like 10 grueling lifetimes. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she shared how she had hoped this class would be helpful since it was her last hope. I explained that to heal and become fully alive again, she needed to find new ways to move, feel, and think, and the class would definitely prove this. Her brain needed to create new patterns that excluded the pain and limitations that she was presently experiencing. There was not a doubt in my mind that her brain could do that. I knew the movements and other exercises I had been guiding her through the workshop would give her brain the information they needed to find new solutions. Madison was worried. She explained that anything at all challenging was scary for her. She needed my assurance, which I was able to give her, that if any of the exercises I gave in the class caused her any discomfort, she could do them in her imagination. I explained that as a source of new information for our brains, imagination is often as effective and powerful as movements, exercises we perform with our bodies. I start most of my workshops by having people lie on their backs on the floor and notice how the different parts of their bodies feel. Nothing could be simpler, but as they do this, I ask them to pay attention not just to their bodies, but also to what they are thinking and feeling emotionally. Then I have them do a very easy sequence of movements and have them pay close attention to what they are sensing in their back, rib cage, neck, shoulders, and even their eyes. They instantly begin feeling more flexible, moving in ways they hadn't been able to move for years. I asked them to stand and describe what they are feeling. Most say they feel taller, lighter on their feet. Many report that they are breathing fuller and easier. These changes, after only a few movements and some awareness instruction, produce outcomes that transform lifelong beliefs and experiences. During the workshop with Madison, I carefully watched as she did the exercises and was not surprised that she did fine with them. In fact, she did better than fine. She did all the movements attentively and gently, gradually becoming bolder, less tentative, less fearful, and far more at ease than I had imagined she would be. As we took a break, I noticed her talking excitedly with the woman next to her. Madison was sitting cross-legged on her mat, gesturing gesturing animatedly with her arms, even throwing back her head now and then to laugh. Her excitement was attracting everyone's attention. I could barely contain my curiosity. As I walked over to her in her direction, she turned and looked up at me, her face radiating with sheer delight. She was already using her neck more freely. With the great enthusiasm, she told me, "I can hardly believe it. My whole body feels so much better." The 3 days of class passed quickly, and as Madison was leaving, she stopped to thank me. She asked if it would be possible to do some individual follow-up sessions with me. Part of her reason for this was that she wanted to stay in touch with me in case her pain returned, but there was more to it than that. "Anat," she said, "these days with you in the workshop have opened up something that feels very new in my life. I want to learn more about it. Do you know what it is? It feels like my brain is doing something I don't think it's ever done before. It's a miracle." I assured her that the miracle was more science than magic. It has so much to do with liberating ourselves from ways of moving and acting that have become so routine and natural for us that we don't even think about them anymore. Madison came in regularly for her private work with me over the next month or two. When she came for her third session, she looked more youthful and energetic than I had ever seen her. I told her how beautiful she looked, and she truly did, and I was certain that she was moving into her life in new, exciting ways. She laughed and nodded enthusiastically. She described how she felt like my wild, expressive self again. Thankfully, you don't have to experience an accident or injury to have this kind of outcome. Vitality can be awakened through my program in spite of my pain from a serious injury, chronic condition, overwork, stress, or what we often associate as normal aging. What Madison experienced is not an isolated or unusual case with or without presenting complaint such as an injury, illness, or trauma. We have only to provide our brains with new information and new possibilities to experience renewed vitality. As our brains form new patterns, we experience a new sense of aliveness and energy, excitement, and enjoyment. Let your mind thrive. In this book, you will discover that we can powerfully, quickly revitalize not only our bodies, but our mental and emotional capacities as well. Kirsten, a concert pianist and piano teacher, first came to me with shoulder pain that she described as maybe just a symptom of how burnt out I'm feeling. As I questioned her further, I began to suspect that in addition to feeling burnt out, Kirsten was seeking something important that she believed was missing from her life. As it turned out, I was right. Her shoulder pain was gone after two private sessions. However, she signed up for weekly classes and began coming to all my longer seminars. One day, she asked if she could sign up for my professional training program, which would require a long-term commitment. I asked her why she wanted to do this, since she had already had a very exciting and successful career in teaching and performing music. She surprised me by explaining that she wanted to learn how to think better. Kirsten had been brought up in a family which girls were not only weren't expected to be smart, but were also taught not to speak or aspire toward any kind of personal achievement. She had challenged those principles enough to become a successful teacher and musician, but she still struggled with the belief that she was not very intelligent. Because of that, she was inhibited in developing her intellectual skills. The ways she had learned to think about herself and her family of origin had become a barrier. But her work with me over the past months had begun removing that barrier. She had experienced profound changes in her ability to think and began feeling more confident in these abilities. She knew that there was more, and she was eager to go even further and engage more fully in the intellectual and mental aspects of her life. Once she realized that it was possible for her to feel and be intelligent, there was no stopping her. In the weeks and months ahead, Kirsten began forming and trusting and expressing her own unique understanding of life. As she continued with this process, she became more and more bold and authentic in her intellectual expression. Her thinking became clearer and more creative. She often told me how empowered she felt and how much she loved the vibrancy and energy of her new intellectual life. Today, she continues to perform and teach, bringing all that she has learned as a practitioner of my method to every aspect of her life. You'll probably not be surprised to learn that she is particularly skillful at helping her students realize greater mental and creative capacities and bringing these to every aspect of their lives. The 9 essentials for vitality. The 9 essentials for vitality form the core of my method. Each of the 9 essentials describes one of the brain's requirements for waking up and doing its job well. That is, creating new connections and avoiding rigidity and limitation. With the 9 essentials, the brain resumes growing and changing at an incredibly fast rate, and it does so at any age and regardless of how or why it stalled, be it through illness or trauma like Madison experienced, by conditioning such as Kirsten experienced in her youth, or by the sheer inertia of routines and habits that have lulled our brains into a haze. Once awakened, our brains resume growing and changing in a way that is very similar to what we experienced as children. Until quite recently, it was believed that after we have grown into adulthood, our brains no longer grow very much, if at all. In fact, it was believed that past the late teens or early 20s, there is a diminishing ability or even no ability to create new connections between various areas of the brain. We know that our brain cells start dying at a rapid rate as we approach middle age, but science has now shown neurogenesis, that is, the production of new brain cells, not only occurs naturally, but can also be enhanced at any age. The adult brain retains impressive powers of neuroplasticity, the ability to change its structure and function in response to experience. For example, even with moderate athletic activity or regular daily exercise, new brain cells start branching out, sprouting new neurons and establishing new connections with other groups of brain cells. In recent research, neuroscientist Alvaro Pascal Leon at the Harvard Medical School, it was shown that in learning new skills, both thinking and moving our bodies in new ways could alter the function as well as the structure of our gray matter. My own observations with thousands of my students repeatedly confirm that with these scientists report. Beyond that, it is clear to me that our brains form new patterns. We experience a renewed sense of aliveness, energy, discovery, excitement, and enjoyment. The 9 essentials will help you tap into your brain's resources and open up a whole new world of possibilities. You can literally become more intelligent. You can learn to move your body better with greater flexibility and ease. You can discover how to give and receive love more successfully, and you can enjoy greater health, vitality, sensuality, flexibility, strength, and creativity throughout the full span of your life. Number 1, movement with intention. Our brains are organized through movement. This includes movements we already know to do and movements we have yet to learn. The more habitual our everyday movements, the less we are able to satisfy the brain's need for growth. As we introduce new patterns of movement combined with attention, our brains begin making thousands, millions, and even billions of new connections. These changes quickly translate into thinking that is clearer, movement that is easier, pain that is reduced or eliminated, and action that is more successful. As a result, new activities that we may not have even dreamed were possible become possible. Number 2, the learning switch. Learning occurs in the brain. However, for the brain to do its job, the learning switch needs to be turned on. During childhood, the learning switch is turned on a lot. As we grow and take on responsibilities of adulthood, we tend to develop habitual patterns, a set way of doing things, rigidity, and resistance to change. Our learning switch turns off and learning slows way down. We can learn to turn the learning switch back on regardless of age. When we do, everything in our lives becomes an opportunity, and miracles seem to pop up everywhere. Our lives are filled with movement, new ideas, vivid memory, sensuality, and pleasure. Number 3,